Junkie. It's time to get your fix. I'm Nikki Leigh.
And I'm Joffrey.
And today we talk with fitness and performance expert Michael Israetel. And we have our first listener question to tackle, which I'm super excited about.
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh. Oh,
On the spot.
like, uh-oh. What is that?
What if we can't answer it? The first question that comes
my
on the
God.
show, and we're like, we don't know.
Oh, no, that would be
Yeah,
so
I-
horrible.
I'm
I
sure.
hope we don't have that
Well, no,
one.
we're not going to have that because you know why?
Why?
Because we'll just make up an answer if we don't know. That's why. So
It's all
yeah,
science-based,
okay.
folks.
All right.
Credibility down the toilet.
There you go.
So how have you been?
I've been good. You? I'm sure you've been, gosh, I know you had the movie thing going on and all that. So tell us a little bit about that. What was that? What are you doing? What's the movie all about and stuff?
So I went out to Louisiana and I did an action movie. I mean, it was just kind of, I don't know, in the industry you have to kind of get to know directors, producers, things like that. So I just kind of did it not as a favor per se, but it wasn't like I was the lead, which is usually what I am in movies. And so, but I was just like getting to know everyone out there. And it was fun. I met a lot of great people. And then I was already out in Baton Rouge and the Super Bowl was like the next week. And so I just went down to New Orleans and I went to all the Super Bowl festivities. I stayed, but have you ever been to New Orleans?
Yeah, I have.
Okay.
Yeah, not like for more. I was there for like a meeting. I wasn't partying or anything.
Oh, I mean, well, I don't drink anyway, so I wasn't really partying, but I was definitely in the mix. And I stayed on Bourbon Street from like Tuesday to, well, I actually ended up flying out right before kickoff on Super Bowl Sunday because it was way too much energy.
Yeah.
Way too much going on. And I was feeling overwhelmed. I felt so much stress in my body. My aura ring was like freaking out on me. Yeah. It literally was saying I was super stressed and I was like, shit, I feel that way. And so I changed my flight.
Yeah.
Yeah. I changed my flight from, I was supposed to come home the Wednesday after Super Bowl and I came home right before kickoff on Super Bowl because I was like, I was literally having what I felt like a panic attack.
Yeah. Well,
it was insane.
That's exciting.
It was. There was so much military and like I've never seen.
Well,
God.
Because they had some terrorist attack just a few weeks.
They had
ago,
they had some sort of attack.
Yeah, it's a little bit nerve wracking. Like, all of those things like, although frankly, like, I wonder if it's, if you're a terrorist, you're like, well, that's going to be too hard to get into that one. So let's skip it.
I mean,
I don't know.
I think
I don't know how they think.
Depends on their strategy, like it depends how they're coming in. Like, I mean, I don't know. I don't.
Yeah. Well, yeah, we could talk about terrorist strategy another time.
That's horrible. Yeah. But do you have anything to catch me up on, Buck?
Well, I watched the Super Bowl on TV.
Okay. Right.
It was a lot.
Were you for Eagles or the Chiefs?
You know what? I was the most neutral and not interested I've ever been in a Super Bowl. Because, it's like Kansas City. Yeah, it's cool. I like Mahomes, but seriously, all they do is win Super Bowls, and it's kind of boring.
Ooh, I could give you some good tidbits on like what happened. So So while I was there, first of all, it was cool. I went to this restaurant and I sat like across the room from Eli Manning and Cooper Manning. That was really cool.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Cooper's the big brother, right? That didn't play. Isn't that right?
Well, he had a back injury.
Yeah.
And that he was like one of the most athletic, and
right.
Yeah, and he wasn't able to play. So it was really cool. They do this thing at a restaurant. I forget the name, and where if it's your birthday, they like ding 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 and have the whole restaurant sing for you. And so, I don't know if someone's birthday over at that table or something, but all of a sudden, like, Eli and Cooper Manning stand up and was like, instead of singing Happy Birthday, we would love for everyone to sing God Bless America. So the entire restaurant sang God Bless America with them like standing up and orchestrating it. Wow. It was really, really cool. Wow. And then I have another tidbit about Mahomes. So,
his dad got into a fight, right? Is that the tidbit?
I don't know about that. I know.
Hmm.
So I went to a restaurant called GW Finn, which is an amazing seafood restaurant.
Uh-huh.
And I guess, Mahomes and his lady wife,
Yeah.
come into the restaurant, and it's like, you have to have, like, a collared shirt at least. It's
Uh-huh.
there is a dress code. But he comes in with, like, this, just this
Yeah.
top or, T-shirt, and they were like, "Well, that's okay. We provide, here we have a
Yeah.
GW Fin, obviously, collared
Yeah.
shirt for you to put on." And the guy goes, "Do you know who I am?"
Uh,
And the host goes, yes, sir, but it doesn't matter. This is our policy." So he puts on the shirt and then he sits down at the table. And when he was at the table, he like took off the shirt and they were like, I'm sorry, sir, but you have to like, keep the shirt on or go get yourself like the proper attire to dine here." And he put up such a fight and was so rude to the people, like with this whole,
wow.
"Do you know who I am?" And I was like, "Oh shit." Like I hate celebrities like that. I hate
That's
people who are known and
surprising.
are
That's a little disappointing to hear about
I
Pat
know.
Mahomes being like that.
I know. And it was shocking. I didn't think that I thought he was like very nice, or I
He seems
assumed.
really nice.
Doesn't he?
Are you sure
But
this isn't just a rumor? This was like
no,
an
I no,
Eagles.
this is real. It's not like I heard it through the grapevine. It's like the
Yeah.
host of the restaurant was like literally
Really?
talking to us and was like, "Wow, we had Mahomes in last night and he was actually really rude to us." And so we were, chatting about that. And which is unfortunate because he does
Yeah.
seem cool and calm.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
And it's like, dude, just chill out. Like, who cares? Like, just wear a damn thing. At
I
least
would
I
like
got some
I'm
rules,
living
but
vicariously through your adventures, so thank you for that.
of course, you're welcome. It's okay. Well, I'll include you now on our listener question. How's that?
Okay, okay. Yeah. I'm
Okay,
bracing myself. Let's do it.
okay, here we
Is there
go.
a special music or anything that goes along with listener?
I don't know.
How about a drum roll?
G'day, Buck. G'day, Nikki. Big fan of the show. Love what you guys are doing on the podcast and trying to take in as much as possible and put it into practice. My question is, I'm working on my sleep. I have an Aura Ring, working on getting 8 hours of sleep a night. Obviously, drinking and stress changes that sometimes, but for the most part, I'm nearly there. As a musician, I do late gigs, so getting to bed is sometimes the times are all irregular. As long as I get 8 hours of sleep, does it matter what time I go to bed? And if it's all over the place, love to get your input. Thanks, guys.
Thanks for the question. I think it's a good question actually, and I
Yeah.
think that it's so a couple of things. Actually, we know from literature, research has been published on night shift workers, so people who have sort of these odd schedules and stuff like that. That night shift work in particular is an independent risk factor for
Mm.
cancers. So that's something to think about. Now, where would that come from? Why would that be? Why would it be associated more with disease processes? So if you go back and you think about, have we had a show on sleep yet? I don't think we have.
No, but we need
Yeah,
to.
yeah. So here's the thing: is like when you wear these Aura rings, which again we advertise the heck out of this without, of course, no one is, you know,
But get
compensating
off
us.
it.
I know. But we need to, I wish they would anyway, whatever.
Hmm.
Okay, so we have when we have these Aura rings, we look at some main variables. The variables that we're looking at a lot of times relate to the total amount of sleep, which is great. 8 hours is fantastic, 7 to 8 hours, whatever.
Hmm.
Um, but there's two types of sleep in that pattern that are really important. One is the deep non-REM sleep. That is that's the most restful sleep. It's when your body really, really recovers. One of the things that happens during that period of time is that your brain actually slightly contracts. And when your brain contracts, there's this fluid, lymphatic fluid that's called glial lymphatic fluid or glymph that's able to kind of go over your brain and essentially wash out a lot of
Mm.
toxins, including aggregates that build up over time that can lead to Alzheimer's disease,
Oh,
right?
wow.
So, so that's one thing to really think about. Uh, there's the other component of sleep that's really important is REM sleep. REM sleep is when you actually um,
When you're dreaming, right?
when you're dreaming. Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's actually when you're paralyzed during that period. Of course, if you're not, you would sleepwalk and jump off of cliffs and things like that. But your body is paralyzed during that period. And that component of sleep is really important for a lot of emotional stuff as well. Now, I bring up these things because, well, you have 8 hours of sleep. Are you getting enough of those? The issue is that the vast majority of deep sleep that a person will get is going to be in the first half of the night. And what that means is when you're really talking about from like 9 a.m. to midnight. And then the REM
9
sleep,
a.m. or 9 p.m.?
no, I'm sorry, you're right. 9 p.m. 9 p.m. to midnight. See, I'm not getting enough sleep myself here these days, but
I'm on it. Don't
so,
worry.
yeah. So most of the deep sleep that you're gonna get is gonna be between 9 p.m. and midnight, whereas most of the REM sleep that you're gonna get is going to be somewhere in that sort of 4 a.m. to, like, 9 a.m. kind of or period. And so the challenge is if you're getting 8 hours, but it's not within those periods of time, you're not probably going to get enough of that kind of sleep. So in other words, if you're going to sleep after midnight every night, right, you're almost certainly not going to get enough deep non-REM sleep because our brains and our bodies are not wired to get that kind of sleep after those periods and times because we're running on these sort of internal clocks,
Is it
right?
so? I wanted to say because of the circadian rhythm. I'm
It's
assuming that's
related
why.
to that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So because otherwise one could maybe argue, research, but one could argue like, okay, well then just in the beginning of sleep, then that's when I need to be most rested with my REM, and towards the end of my sleep before I wake up, that's when the uh or that was the deep sleep. The REM is right before you wake up, and so, but I think I think it's really has to do with our circadian rhythm, like
Yep.
right when you get.
Yeah, it absolutely does. When you go to a new time zone and stuff,
Hmm.
that's what happens. So
Hmm.
basically once you've adjusted your brain and your internal clock, your circadian rhythm, as you said, are adjusting. And no matter what, when you go to sleep, that deep sleep stuff is going to happen at the same time of the night. So whether you're there or not to take advantage of it is really up to you.
That's funny.
Right.
So
So net though, the bottom line is if you don't get enough of these kinds of sleep, there's a lot of literature research to suggest that it will lead to a number of health problems or contribute to a number of chronic health issues.
that's so sad and so
Yeah,
dangerous.
it is because some
But
people don't have a choice.
I know exactly. I also think though that to his point of like, well, does the 8 hours matter then? Yes, it definitely matters. And I think having as much rest as possible, especially if you're off of the circadian clock and all that, is, I would think, more crucial. I think it would be more crucial to make sure that your body gets rest as much as possible so that it can actually recover. Because even if, like in our episode today about like muscle building, it's like, you're gonna see it really is about also your recovery, and I have personal experience with that where I'm realizing the more that I sleep, I literally do everything I can. I've changed everything to get 8 hours, and even if that means sleeping later or whatever I need to do, I will get 8 hours. Like, I track it on my Aura Ring. I literally will go back to sleep if I don't have that 8 hours, and it has helped me like even slim down and grow muscle, and I've been working out less than I ever have in my life. And it's just, I mean, I'm getting so like, I'm like weirded out. Like, all I needed to do was sleep more.
There you go.
Like,
You just need to
yeah,
sleep.
right. So sleep is like not, I love that you told us about the
Mhm.
that liquid that goes over our brain
Yeah. The
once you go into that
glymph.
deep sleep.
Yeah,
The
glymph.
glimpse. That's it.
Mhm.
That's I knew that there was a washing of the
Yeah.
brain in a way, but I didn't know it was, like, kind of a literal
Yeah.
washing
So
of
your
the
brain
fluid.
actually will contract to
Mhm.
let more of that stuff in, and that happens only during the deep sleep
That's so
issue.
awesome.
Right.
Nice. Well, that was a great first question. Thanks, Troy.
Yeah. We had an
I
answer too. It was
I
great.
A great answer. I love that we had our first question. And please, everyone out there, if you have any of your own questions, go to our website, longevityjunkie with a Y.com, and make sure that you just leave an audio message. I think it's pretty amazing to have it so personal and being able to really voice it. So please go on. We would love your questions. And yeah, thanks. We're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we'll talk with fitness and performance expert Michael Israetel.
Longevity Junkie is grateful to our partners at BioAccelerator for a very memorable trip and experience.
Agreed. Buck and I both benefited greatly from this incredible stem cell therapy, which can play a huge role in longevity.
You may know BioAccelerator is one of the leading stem cell research laboratories in the world, delivering advanced therapies directed at anything from anti-aging, pain relief, skin rejuvenation, and even preventive care.
It's truly inspiring work that can help each and every one of us. And if you want to learn more, please reach out to Liz at longevityjunkie@bioaccelerator.com for special discounts and offers. That's longevityjunkie, spelled with a Y, at BioAccelerator.com for special discounts and offers. Welcome back to Longevity Junkie. Time for our guest interview. It's the breakdown with Dr. Michael Israetel. Dr. Michael Israetel, PhD, is a fitness and performance expert with a doctorate in sports physiology from East Tennessee State University. He's the co-founder and chief content officer of RP Strength and the face of their popular YouTube channel. Michael has a wealth of experience having taught exercise science courses at Lehman College, Temple University, and the University of Central Missouri. Welcome to the show, Michael.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor. And I just, for those tuning in, I showed up late, like a total bad person. And you know what? I am a bad person, so it fits character.
Mike, I was worried that you were under a barbell. I was worried that you didn't have a spotter and that
it's realistic. I was somewhere like, help, I got a podcast to get to, people.
Well, for those who don't know you, I mean, I hope they just don't go off the bad person thing. I don't think that's true at all. But your journey is quite incredible. And coming to a new country as a Russian immigrant and earning a PhD and excelling at both being a powerlifter and a bodybuilder. I mean, that's really a true dedication and next level resilience, in my opinion. Can you take us through your path from being a Russian immigrant to where you are today and maybe how that unique background has really shaped the way you think about muscle science?
Muscle science, yes. Well, thank you so much for the very kind words. I don't think I've ever been an exceptional bodybuilder and powerlifter. I've been okay at both, trying my best. I suppose all of us are. I grew up until I was 7 years old in Moscow, Russia, and was born in 1984. My family came in 1991 to the United States, and we were very selective because we came for a lot of wealth. So we went to the most advanced city the United States had, which was Detroit, Michigan.
Nice.
Wow.
Yes, the flying cars was really what sold it. And so we showed up and, I had to learn a new language. I remember walking off of a bus to go to sort of summer day camp my first year here when I was 7. And the only thing I really knew how to say other than like table and apple was, I don't know how to speak English.
Well, that's good. Yeah.
I remember even back then, I was kind of a little bit cynical in my own head because the camp counselor ladies, they were very nice. Everyone was very sweet. I walked down the bus and she's like, blah, 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 blah. And I was like, I don't know how to speak English. And she just goes, blah, 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 blah. And the first thing I thought was like, lady, I clearly just said I don't know how to speak English. Any more English words will not help the situation.
Right.
But then she pointed me somewhere and I went and made friends. I'm just kidding. I never made friends. And then so, because at 7 years old, you're very young. After 2 years, I was fully bilingual. After 4, I had no accent. Wow. And unless you guys think I have an accent now.
No, not actually.
I don't think so, no.
I was expecting more of one.
Maybe a little bit of Detroit coming out, if anything,
What does that mean? How dare you? We speak just like the people on the news do.
Hey, listen, I'm from Minnesota. I get,
Oh, now don't you dare compare me to yourself, sir. Oh, don't you know?
Yeah.
So the Minnesotans are very nice people.
They are nice people.
The Detroiters, not so nice.
Well, I don't know. I mean, depends where you're at, right? Were you like an 8-mile territory? Were you like
A 9
M&M
mile,
town?
actually.
9 mile? Were you
Is
9
that a
mile?
real thing?
It is a real thing. Yeah, we have mile
Okay.
roads.
Yeah.
It actually starts at like 5 mile and goes up to like 26 mile and stuff.
Oh,
I mean,
wow. That's great to know.
Were you, were you following an M&M around and things like that?
We crossed paths, but
Yeah.
I was involved in a much harder gang culture.
Were you really?
So he normally would just not associate with me because a lot of his, friends had sort of fallen by the wayside because of my gang and their involvement.
Is that right?
Cute.
Interesting.
I'm kidding. I'm totally kidding.
Oh.
Nick,
Oh,
I got you.
damn
Good
it,
now.
I
was really
yeah.
thought
This is
I-
going to keep happening. Yeah, I have a very good deadpan, so you never can tell if I'm lying or not.
Yeah. Well, I liked it. Stick with it.
Oh, stop.
We're editing
Yeah, well,
it.
that just makes stuff up. Yeah. So anyway, I discovered space and then I became a rocket and that was really cool. And, so in any case, I had a fine suburban upbringing and I started wrestling when I was in high school and I liked that a lot. And then I discovered lifting weights helped me in wrestling. And then I sort of, after a few years, fell in love with that. And I just kept doing the lifting weights. I got to college and I realized I need to learn how to lift weights better. And I already knew that science was kind of the surest path to truth. So I went fully invested and got myself a science degree for lifting weights, more or less kinesiology, movement science at the University of Michigan. Went to a master's program, worked in New York City for a year as a personal trainer with my co-founder of our company, RP, Mr. Nick Shaw. And then I went to a PhD program at East Tennessee State University, got a PhD in sport physiology, which was really like Dr. Mike was born. And I learned infinite amount of stuff. It was an amazing experience. Then I was a professor and a competitive bodybuilder and competitive Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu grappler. And now I have like a black belt in Jiu-Jitsu and I'm an okay bodybuilder. And I power lifted back in college a while and it was really, really fun. As far as my upbringing helping me with stuff, man, I don't know. A lot of us tell ourselves a lot of kind of just so stories about what was in our upbringing that influenced us. And we can't ever really tell which part was genetic and which part was behavioral and which part was what part of the environment. Was it parental upbringing? Was it my peer group? Was it what, my particular individual experiences? I'm sure all that plays a role. As far as strength stuff, I will say that being of Russian origin definitely doesn't hurt your confidence that you might be okay at lifting weights. My Russianness and knowing that I was Russian and had that heritage is kind of like, when there's a heavy barbell loaded and the weight's already bending the bar, even though it's just sitting there, I'm like, yeah, I can probably do that. Like, it's fun. It's fun to get in harm's way. And that's definitely a Russian thing.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
maybe like that. I don't know.
Nice.
Yeah. Well, with muscle growth, I personally think it's like a biological magic trick that our body does. I mean, it literally rebuilds itself to get bigger, better, and stronger. And this is a process called hypertrophy, and where the muscle fibers increase in size due to repeated stress from training, just for the listeners out there in case we use that term. But what's actually happening, in your opinion, and with all your education and everything from the background, can you explain what's really happening beneath the surface? What are the key physiological processes that drive hypertrophy and how can we optimize them for maximum gains?
Basically, your muscles aren't just containers of protein in which you pour protein like you would pour sand into a cup or something like that. They're very complex architectural structures that are designed to take your muscle cells and pull them together. And when you attach the cells to each other, and then you attach the cells to the tendons and the tendons attach to the bones, when you contract the muscle cell, the proteins pull towards each other, shortens the cell, and it brings your bones closer together, and voila, that's how muscle contraction works. And then so your muscles, because they're sitting there and they're based on these muscle cells, the cells have these kind of interweaving strands of protein inside of them. And one strand kind of walks up another and thus pulls it from one side of the cell to the other. But how many strands you have is you have a certain amount just being alive and being a person. But if you lift weights and if you eat enough protein and you eat enough calories to power the processes that grow muscle, your body just kind of grows more strands and it makes each individual cell bigger and bigger and bigger. And at some point, the cells get so big that the nucleus of the cell, kind of like the control center, imagine like a city analogy. It's like the fire department and the hospital and the postal service. Like they're required to help the city operate. If you have a small town that grows into New York City overnight, the local PD is not going to be able to control that process. And so at some point, when your muscle cells get big enough, there's actually these special cells called satellite cells that are all around them. And the muscle cells like, hey, wake up. Like, we need more nuclei. We need more control centers, more fire departments and hospitals, so to speak, to join our huge muscle city and let the cells grow even bigger. So the satellite cells get taken up into their normal muscle cells. And they're like, okay, now we have more machinery with which to grow and control our muscle size. And the cells get bigger and bigger and bigger. And as individual cells get bigger, and you only have so many of them, but as they grow in size, the overall muscle on the macro scale grows in size. And then at some point, you're supposed to become like popular or happier when you get bigger muscles. I've got none of that, but some people have been very successful with that.
Well, some people are very successful and can build muscle effortlessly.
Yes.
Some have to work twice as hard, 3 times as hard. So does that come down to genetics? What about age? Like, does muscle growth really slow down as we get older? Is that a myth, or can you break that down of the aging process and shaping of our muscle building potential and things
Yes,
like
of
that?
course. So genetics is a huge factor, but genetics won't be the biggest factor unless you have the critical factors in order. So if you have whatever genetics you have, if you're consuming enough daily protein split into like 3 or 4 meals, maybe a few more, if you are consuming enough calories to power the muscle growth process and the training process and let you recover, and if you are lifting weights kind of in any reasonable way, that plus your genetics plus time is going to determine how jacked you get to like 85%. There's minutia that matter and fill in the rest of the 15, but fundamentally, eating protein, consuming calories, lifting weights regularly, doing it for years and years and years, and you're going to find out what kind of genetics you have.
When you said with the protein, you just said like 3 or 4 little meals throughout the day, but then you just say you need a lot of protein. If somebody ate like a lot of protein in like one sitting, basically, instead of having it spread out, is that matter?
It does. So if you eat
Oh.
like 1 meal per day with all of your protein,
Yeah.
a large fraction of that protein will get put into muscle growth. But that process per any hour of time can only take so much. And so the rest of the protein, maybe half of it in that case, is just going to go to being used for energy. And then later in the day, when your muscles are like, we need more protein to keep growing, you're like, I don't know, fellas, we just ate all of it at the same time. And so we can't give you any more. So if you split that into 2 meals per day, it's better. Then much more of the protein fraction in any meal is used for growth, much less for energy. If you split it up to 4 meals per day, roughly evenly spaced, same amount of total protein per day, you end up in a situation where like you're really attending to pretty much all of the muscle growth requirements for protein, and much less of it is going to energy. If you go to 5 meals per day, it just doesn't seem to offer a dependable effect that we can detect reliably in the literature, which says 2 things. Maybe we need better studies, but also says like whatever the studies are going to find out, it's not going to make like a huge world of difference, you know? At some point, it's just like, okay, we sort of have done enough for most of the situation to be where it is. So yeah, eating, like, I like to say there's like a professional attempt at growing muscle and then like a decent swing at it. A decent swing is 3 evenly spaced meals per day with a good amount of protein. If you're like really intending on getting much more muscular, but you eat once a day, you're going to see gains. For sure, you're going to see gains, and even very good gains. But can you tell people like, yeah, I'm not as big as I want to be because of genetics? Well, now hold on a second. How hard are you trying? However, if you're lifting weights pretty hard, if you're getting enough sleep and rest and recovery, if you're eating like 3 or 4 or more evenly spaced protein meals per day and enough calories to where you can gain some weight, because, you know, believe it or not, muscle is made of weight. And if you want to be 180 pounds jacked, you can't do it at 160. I know it's crazy,
Yeah,
but
and you
Einstein
can't
and
and you can't
physics.
read the scale, right? Like that's such an old way of doing things. They just don't like a higher number on the scale, which sometimes
Yeah.
a
Oh,
higher
but
number on the scale is actually
yeah.
better, and you're leaner.
Yes. And so like, man, you know, it depends on how jacked you want to get. But if you want to get much, much, much more jacked, you got to gain a little weight, ideally. Can you get really jacked and lose weight at the same time? Absolutely. Will it be like your most muscular you could have been? No, not even close. And so a lot of times when people try to assess their genetics, what they're doing is they just don't have the input side that's not genetics, like the food and the protein and the lifting and the recovery nearly checked off enough. And they're like, oh, it's my genetics. And like, yeah, maybe you don't have the best genetics in the world, but you have much, much, much better results if you actually tried. It's like saying to someone like, hey, like, how's your dating life? And they're like, I don't know, man, I'm not meeting a whole lot of people. And you're like, okay, like, so, but you going on dates? They're like, well, no, like, okay, so, but you're on the websites, you're on Hinge or whatever. They're like, no, I haven't done that. And you're like, okay, so you're not even really trying. How can you possibly complain that dating's not going well?
Wait, I'm going to write that down. I'm going to write that down. Hold on, Mike.
You're like, go to Hinge tonight and talk about protein.
Leave the house. Leave the house.
Yes, leave the house. Step one. Which, like, believe it or not, for real people struggling with intimacy, like, that is honestly a thing sometimes you have to tell folks. And they're like, right, okay, huh. And so genetics is a huge factor as long as you filled in the other factors.
When you talk about muscle cells, obviously with fat cells, they don't multiply, right? You're just hypertrophy. You're just getting bigger and smaller fat cells. And I used to do a bunch of liposuction, and well, guess what? If you take fat one area out, the rest of the body's fat cells will get slightly bigger somewhere else. And that's not a bad thing necessarily for people who are not in, want to change their overall shape, but it doesn't, eliminate fat. So it's a parallel to that with muscle growth. Genetically, do you have like a finite number of muscle cells that you're born with, and then you're just going to have hypertrophy on those? Or like, how does that work?
So it turns out in most cases, you don't multiply the number of fat cells that you have, that you shrink or grow.
Mm-hmm.
If you get to beyond roughly 15 to 30 pounds heavier than you used to be, in most cases, you will start to multiply fat cells. Fat cell hyperplasia absolutely occurs, very, very common in folks that get really overweight, which is a real big problem because once the fat cells have lost a lot of their contents, if you lose weight, let's say you used to weigh 150 pounds, and then your boyfriend broke up with you, so now a few weeks later you weigh 250. Typical ice cream, chocolate-covered pretzels really do a lot of work is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
And then you weigh 250. I'm kidding. This usually takes years. And then so you're actually going to have like multiples the number of fat cells. When you lose weight again, you can.
Okay.
But then they scream out at you because they're hormonally like, you need to refill us. There's more of us now. We're hungry. And that causes a ton of problems for folks trying to lose weight again. I wish the same was true for muscle, but to your point, it's not. Probably not. There's no dependable literature confirming that hyperplasia, which is a growth in cell number instead of cell size, occurs in human muscle tissue. Does that mean we've ruled it out entirely? Absolutely not. However, it's probably not a thing that happens often, maybe under extreme circumstances.
Yeah.
So that's a thing. That being said, as your cells grow, the satellite cells that typically hang out and don't do much donate their nuclei every now and again. And you don't have a fixed number of satellite cells. They can replicate and push in. So the net effect is as if hyperplasia happens, but it's all one big cell with a bunch of different nuclei. That absolutely does happen. There is a limit on how prone your satellite cells are to both replicating and pushing themselves into muscle and being activated to do so. Because your body, from a muscular perspective, is inherently resistant to growth because mostly of a molecule called myostatin. So myostatin and a couple of its related molecules, they're operating in your body all the time. They're operating in your muscles. Myo means muscle. Statin means to block or to stop. And so they block muscle growth all the time. They're in there doing their nasty, nasty things. And have you guys ever seen where they have pictures of the double muscle mice or the cows or the greyhounds, and they're just like ridiculously jacked? Well, none of those animals train with weights. They don't take steroids. They just have their myostatin gene knocked out. And as soon as myostatin is not present in the body, number one priority for muscle cells is just keep growing until like physical limits get really intense. So the myostatin situation means your body actually always wants to grow muscle, but for myostatin, it can't. We will have myostatin drugs for humans in 2 years or 3 years, depending on how the approval process goes. They're already done testing in monkeys. And let me tell you, the monkeys are getting jacked, which I'm so jealous of. I just want to be a lab monkey so I can have a purpose in my life and also get jacked for no reason. That's two great things.
So it's interesting though, because like that kind of drug, I mean, can you target certain kinds of muscle? Because obviously you would not want to have jacked cardiac muscles and end up in heart failure.
Jacked blood vessels.
Yeah. So like how does that work?
Skeletal specific.
It's skeletal specific.
Yes,
okay.
which is cool because it doesn't mess with your heart.
Yeah.
It doesn't close up your urinary tract, which would be unfortunate. I mean, you have a jacked urinary tract, but unfortunately not comes out of it anymore. It's a cool flex, odd flex.
We used to do that in elementary school where we tried to pee like from across the room into urinals. Did you guys do that in Detroit?
Oh, yeah. Oh, God, yeah. Oh, God, yeah. I mean, like, I don't definitely do that in the shower now, for sure, as a 40-year-old man. Like, there are ultimate tests of manhood. Like, you get a spear and you fight another man or whatever, or you try to wrestle a bull, but like, how far can you pee is like as old as time.
True, pissing contest. Yeah.
Well,
literally.
I thought that was a Midwestern thing, but I guess
no,
maybe
universal.
Did they do that in Russia too? Back
That's all we did in Russia, really. That's why the economy's in shambles. So I can't speak for Russia. Thank God, as a 7-year-old, I did not expose myself to other children often by psychiatrists. It happened a lot, but not like an extreme. I was never institutionalized for it until later. And then, the thing with the skeletal muscle specific targeting is it's already a thing, no problem. However, there are parts of your skeletal muscles which most people don't really associate. So you guys see how my head looks kind of weird and I have all this stuff here that you're not supposed to have as a human being? That's because it's actually muscle. And that's just, I have weird genetics. Yeah. And if you like, I don't know, it's not getting
I see it.
That whole thing. If you see some pictures of me or see me in real life, you're going to be like, the hell is wrong with your head?
Yeah.
And that folks who are going to take these drugs in the future are going to have two options, at least at first. One is just start to look pretty jacked all over, including your face. And two is going to take Botox to the jaw musculature, which people already do anyway. So I'm sure the housewives will start doing that. But the myostatin thing aside, your muscles actually want to grow all the time. They can't because of myostatin and a few other regulators. However, if you have not so great genetics for training, you could train really hard, eat all the protein, get all the recovery, and your muscle cells are like, hey, satellite cells, wake up. And your satellite cells are like, I don't know. They open up the window. It's kind of dark and rainy. They close it. They go back to sleep. And not a lot happens. Whereas other folks, they do one curl and their satellite cells are like marching orders with the military and saluting the general and making themselves enormous. And you're like, oh, wow, it really just doesn't take much. That's one of the ways in which genetics expresses itself. People work equally hard. Some people get ultra jacked and some people just not as much happens as they might think. Most folks, a lot of good stuff will happen because it's a normal distribution, like a bell curve. Most people are somewhere in the middle where you're going to get some great results and you don't have to like abandon all hope.
So let's get into sort of the nitty gritty, like, people trying to figure out like what to do like in the gym in terms of optimizing and the science behind that. So, I've watched actually a lot of bodybuilders talk about these issues of optimal number of reps, sets, number of times per week to work out. I actually really enjoyed, whether his stuff is legit or not, the old days with Mike Mentzer. Like, I love this guy. He was like this philosopher, bodybuilder and completely different from the rest of the guys. But he talked essentially about like doing one set to like maximum failure and only doing that like once per week per body part. And then you'd have guys like Arnold who were in the gym like all the time. So what do we know today? I mean, like when you look at this as literally a PhD in this stuff, what is the optimal, program in terms of just sets, numbers, times per week if you want to optimize muscle growth?
That's a good question. So there are average figures that work really well for most people. If you train every given muscle group 2 to 4 times per week, if you train every muscle group with something like 5 to 10 sets, working sets, not warm-up sets, close to failure.
Per week or like
in each one of those sessions, then you're talking about starting the conversation for optimality. And depending on how many muscles you want to train or how often you want to go to the gym and how much time you want to spend, there's going to be some different recommendations for what kind of buy-in you're going for. However, optimal is a very, very different discussion than just works really well and you don't have to put in a lot of time. Because imagine going into a car dealership and they're like, well, so what car do you want to buy? They never ask that. They're like, what you really need is a special, this one that costs way too much. But imagine you went into a car dealership and you were like, I want the most optimal car. They're going to be like, yeah, like the Lamborghini's right over there. It's $260,000. Good luck. that is, you're like, whoa. Okay, hold on. Let's weave back the optimal. What car is going to be good? It's not going to break. It's going to get me to work and back, and it's going to be awesome. And they're like, well, like the base model Tesla is like $35,000, and there it is. And you're like, okay, but it's not the worst car. Like, no, it's great, but it's not the best car. They're like, no, it's not. But do you want the best? You need the best car. How many people pick up lifting weights and they look at a magazine of like a crazy veiny bodybuilder, and they're like, if it's not this, it's nothing. Almost no one, weirdos like me. And so if you want to grow a lot of really decent muscle, you can train with 1 to 2 sessions per week for the same muscle. You can train with 1 to 5 hard sets per session, and you can get amazing results.
So
and
how
so
many
now we
reps
have this.
in those sets?
What's that?
How many reps in those sets?
Yes. And so reps generally anywhere between 5 hard reps. By the end of the rep, you're really struggling to get it up. Maybe have a few more reps in the tank if you really had to push it. Anywhere between 5 and really like 30 is no wrong answers. And they all have roughly the same effect on hypertrophy, at least in the medium term, as far as we can tell. So 1 to 2 times per week of 1 to 5 sets per session per muscle. And a lot of muscles you can train at the same time. Like if you do a close grip bench, you hit your triceps, your front delts, and your chest, and you can check the boxes as like, that's sweet. And then if you do that with sets of 5 to 30 reps after a bit of a warm up, you are well on your way. And at the other end, we have 2 to 4 sessions per week, 5 to 10 work sets per session per muscle, still the same 5 to 30-ish rep range. And so we have the easy mode on one side and the very hard mode on the other. And here's the simplest formula I can give folks listening for how to navigate this. You're going to start your fitness journey. You want to start at the low end, and you're going to see amazing gains because it's like the noob effect, the beginner effect. Your muscles are super responsive. They've never had anything, before. I was going to make the most absurd analogy, and I'm not going to do it. Should I do it? I shouldn't do it.
Yeah, do it. Why don't you do it? We were already there.
We're already there.
People that are trying to get into the whole dating thing, which I would know nothing about, because most of my dating life has been wildly unsuccessful until my parents got me an arranged marriage with this girl. But I'm kidding. Am I?
I should know.
Maybe. So you're getting into dating, and you're like, "Hi, I got a date," and your friends know some people. They're like, "Well, no, she's cool. She's cool." Let's say you're very young, 18 or something. And you're like, no, it's got to be the perfect girl. And like, wow, that's like all romantic, Romeo and Juliet or whatever. A lot of times you want to get some experience, and dating's still really fun, even if you meet some cool people who like maybe on a picture weren't the ideal match for you. And if you're like, if it's not the perfect girl from a 8x10, I'm not even going out. Like, that's a way to do it. And maybe you'll meet the love of your life sometime, maybe. Just like you're new to dating, just start going, meeting people and having fun. And so with lifting, it's very similar. People are like, what's the optimal protocol? Like, my friend, you don't need the optimal protocol yet. You need something that works really well and just doesn't take up a lot of your time. And as your body changes, and as you lift, and as you experience the growth, you're going to be like, one of two things. Oh, I like this, but I don't need any more of this. This is great. Or you're going to be like, I hate this. I'm out. No worries. So you can do cycling or running. And then the other one is, I really love this and I want more. And then if you conclude you want more, you don't just go right away to the maximum plan. You just scale it over weeks and months and years until 5 to 10 years into training, you're really full sending into getting all the gains milked out.
So what's your thought on, is it, for each one of these sets, you talk about essentially going to exhaustion, right? But does it matter if you're using heavier weight and less reps versus lower weight and more reps, or is it a matter of total amount of work, or does it matter at all? I mean, you just got to be tired.
The best answer that's simple is it doesn't matter because you just have to be tired, but there are some nuances. Some folks just respond better because of their physiology to higher reps or lower reps or medium reps. Some folks psychologically enjoy one or the other more. Some people just want to get in there and have a squat bury them for sets of 6, and that's just how they feel alive. And if you're like, why don't you just do leg presses for sets of 25? They do one, it hurts them in a deep way. They can't comprehend. They're like, I'm never doing this again. Whereas other folks, they're like, I don't want any injury risk. I'm just going to do the lighter weights, but really get the burn because I love pain. You're like, anytime we think we're tough in bodybuilding, like marathon runners exist, and they deal with insane pain for like hours on end. And some folks are more of that psychology. They love high reps. Another one, as I sort of hinted at, is injury risk calculation. It's categorically true to say that the heavier you go, the more likely it is that you're going to get hurt in the gym, relatively speaking. absolutely speaking, it's highly, highly, highly unlikely that you're going to get hurt. Every time you drive your car on the freeway, absolutely speaking, it's just not that dangerous. But if you go like 30 miles an hour faster, it's still not that dangerous, but it's way, way, way more dangerous than if you just went like just below the speed limit. So in much the same way, if you're really injury averse, older folks might fall into this, folks with pre-existing injuries, people that want to make a professional attempt at bodybuilding who can't afford to get hurt, they need to be training a little bit lighter in most cases because you get really kind of the same growth. It's just not worth it to go heavier. Another one is variation. You get bored of going heavy all the time and your joints start flaring up a little bit. You go lighter for a few months. It's new, it's fresh, it's awesome. You get great growth. Your joints calm down. And then you're like, these high reps suck. And then you go back. So the answer basically is like all of them are good, but certain contexts, certain people, certain responses, one or the other or the middle side of the spectrum can be better for some time.
Well, it does seem to me though when you're talking about, and it frankly it surprises me a little bit because it makes it seem like, well, why am I trying to like push so hard to get to the next, weight if that's more, more likely to give me an injury if rather than just, trying to do a lot more reps. And just making sure that I'm exhausted, right? Like if it doesn't make a difference for hypertrophy, then it might be safer might be better for most people to stay lighter.
Maybe. The other thing is heavy lifting does grow your bones more. So for Caucasian females, especially.
I'm listening. Go ahead.
I was coughing for myself. I identify as a Caucasian female. For those folks, yeah, like sets of 5 every now and again are really, really good because they build your bones in a way that sets of 25 don't. But for people just trying to figure out, yeah, you're totally right. Like if you like ping your tricep and you're like, dang it, sets of 5 on the skull crusher really screwed me again. It's really good to know, like, sets of 15 probably won't do that. And they're still going to get you super jacked. And it's like a cool unlock that you can be like, oh, this is a thing that works.
One of the things that, I heard Dorian Yates talk about another, for people. I mean, this is kind of a new thing for me too, like to be listening to like these guys, these old bodybuilders is kind of fun, but
sure.
Dorian Yates is another, legendary bodybuilder back in the day. And he was talking about how, people who go in there just trying to get, they're, guys who are just trying to do the Jersey Shore thing where they're just getting like a big upper body and no legs whatsoever.
Skip leg day.
Yeah. So Dorian was saying that like that is not a good way to think about it because that he said that doing the legs actually helped his upper body grow. Is there science to that? I mean, is it just a matter of like growth factors being stimulated because you got these big muscles and that helped his upper body grow? Or is that just anecdotal gym bro stuff?
Goes both ways. So on the one hand, we can't conclusively rule out that training your legs hard doesn't have some kind of systemic effect that makes your upper body more jacked. On the other hand, we know two things. One is that the more you want to grow in a certain area, the less you should be training other areas is generally a good rule. If you want the biggest upper body you can get, not training anything other than your upper body is actually the best way to do it because there's a constraint on resources and fatigue. And so like if you want that to go better, you're going to just pour all your resources into that. It's kind of like wanting to remodel your dining room and kitchen at the same time. You only have so much money. If you want kitchen to look really, really, really good, you're going to put all the savings into that instead of the dining room. The other thing is there's a hypothesis back in the day that the systemic factors are like growth hormone and testosterone. It's actually true to say that growth hormone and testosterone both get secreted much more when you're doing heavy compound lifts, especially for the lower body, squats and deadlifts. What are these called? The lifts that put some hair on your chest. Nikki, stay calm. Because anti-hair chest things are just modern cosmetics can take care of. But even for women, they're just going to be hairy all over. I'm totally kidding. Ladies, don't tune out. No literal hairs ever grown on anyone's chest because of this. But the increased testosterone and growth hormone, people thought like, well, yeah, like it's going to for sure grow muscle. The problem is, if you look at how growth hormone works over a 24-hour cycle, it elevates and falls in these smooth curves. The curves are really quite tall. And then a workout, it just goes blip, and then it goes back down. So the total area under the curve, how much exposure you have to growth hormone from lifting heavy, is so small that even if it mechanistically grew muscle, then it just wouldn't grow much, hardly at all. And the extra fatigue of leg training would almost certainly make up for it. So the whole testosterone thing works in a similar way. and thus it's now the best hypothesis that's the most data-driven, is like, yeah, there might be some cool interacting effects for legs and upper body, but generally it's probably good to just kind of, if you want only upper body, train upper body. It's also, to me, the biggest thing to think about is health and aesthetics. Health perspective, you should train your legs because they could get really muscular, and having more muscle on your body is healthier in like a trillion different ways. And I'm actually currently, I just finished a rough draft of a book about how getting more muscle and less fat can make you healthier. So that'll be all be explained. There's tons and tons of science.
Sure.
So that's definitely a thing. But the other thing is aesthetics and preference. You know, people will say, oh, you can't have skinny legs, but like, who's to tell a person who wants to have normal sized legs but a big upper body that that's not a good look? And typically, while there are some, for example, for the male female situation, there are some females that prefer muscular legs and butt on a guy. Most females really don't, first of all, care about muscle hardly at all. And second of all, when they do, yeah, no, I know it's true. I said most, I didn't say you.
Okay. I was like, what? I totally do. Okay.
You know, some girls, they love it, right? But it's one of those, you know, it's not for everyone sort of things. And the girls that like the muscular folks, they generally tend to like specific muscles to be developed on average more than others. And that generally means width of the back, kind of that V taper. You know, you get a man in a really good fitted suit and his kind of lats are popping out. You're like, whew, it's getting hot in here. And then bigger shoulders, bigger arms, bigger chest, especially upper chest. And then like if you see a guy who has a small upper body, but just the veiniest, nastiest legs in the world, most women aren't like, oh my God, Wanda, hold my drink. I have to go talk to him until he runs away with his big legs. But there are variations. So when people want more legs or fewer, more leg muscle, fewer leg muscle additions, then it's really up to them to go from a health perspective and from an aesthetic perspective. So I don't like to value judge a ton. Although like, yeah, serious lifters, if you have really skinny legs, they'll judge you 100% every time.
But what about this saying of more is better? Like when it comes to training, I don't know if that's always the case. I mean, with extra sets and reps can actually hurt us rather than help us. And is there science that says anything about a tipping point when does more exercise stop being beneficial and start working against muscle growth?
Like diminishing returns, right?
Yeah. Diminishing returns are a factor as soon as you do one set. The next set grows much less extra muscle than the first set does. And the third set, way less extra muscle. And the fourth set, way less. So it's more, but it's not as much. So for example, let's say you work one day of a week in this really weird job and your boss pays you $1,000. Like, all right, can I come in tomorrow? Sure. But on Tuesdays, we pay people $500. You're like, still worth it. What about Wednesday at $250? Like, all right, Thursday, $125. And you're like, if I'm not coming in Friday, because you're not going to get me here for like $60 or whatever. And so if you want more money, you work more days of the week in that system. In much the same way, if you want more muscle, up until you're training with, 20 to 25 sets for every part of your body per week, hard, week in and week out, doing more is better. But it's a curvilinear asymptotic more is better, so that the first 2 or 3 sets that you do, man, they're getting you like way more than 50% of the growth. And then the rest is extra on top. And that's where that old thing I said before of start on the low end. And if you get gains that are amazing, awesome. If you want more gains, do more, but more doesn't mean like double the muscle or something. It means 1.5x the muscle and then a little less, a little less, a little less, until you get to so much training. Typically, many people will see this for whole body training. If you're training every muscle pretty hard, somewhere in that 20 to 25 weekly set range, your overall fatigue for your body, your overall tiredness level from just beating the living crap out of yourself so hard gets to be so much, it interferes on a systemic level with growth. And then you have to back it up and be like, okay, if I want to grow my biceps more, because individual muscles can go sometimes to 30 and 40 sets per week and still benefit, you have to take something and put it on the back burner. So, okay, my chest and my back, I'm going to do just a few sets per week to keep them the same size, which is cool. You only need about a third of the volume that makes you grow. You need about a third of that number of sets to completely maintain your muscle size relatively indefinitely for years.
That's good to know.
Until you get older, and then muscle growth starts getting a little tougher to answer a question I didn't answer for the first time. So yeah, aging is a thing. It's not a huge thing. I think a lot of people overvalue how big of a deal that is. And then once you're in that position of, okay, now I can train my biceps more, my overall systemic recovery is the same, but I fill in more of that with biceps and less of it with chest and back. And now my arms can get really, really big. So you have to play a balancing act. It takes a lot of training to push your body to the extreme if it's not going to grow any more muscle when you train more. Can be done, but that's like, for folks listening, that's like an hour and a half a day, 5 days a week of training where people in the gym are looking at you and like, is she going to be okay? Or is she like fighting demons? The answer could be both, by the way. And then you're any more than that for weeks on end could be like too much. But I think if you're training 3 times a week for an hour at a time and you're like, I think I'm under recovering. I think I'm overtraining. There's a probability that happens, but it's low. And so you're probably just like, shut up and go lift more weights.
When people have like sort of, the initial results and they get super excited. I mean, this is kind of like personal anecdote for me. Like I never was really like lifting most of my life. In the last couple of years, I started getting into it. In the first year, I mean, like everything, I like went up by 100% on every one of my lifts within, I don't know, within like 8 or 9 months. And then obviously you start to slow down. What do you do if you, I mean, other than just adding sets, is there some tricks that you have to try to get past those, I guess those plateaus? Yeah.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you for the word. That's what I was looking for.
Yes.
I've had it before. That's why.
Yes. Painful memories.
Yeah.
There are strategies. I can't call them tricks because when I tell you them, that's not really much of a trick.
Yeah.
More of an organized approach. It's kind of lame. Tricks I want to be easy. I want a magician can do it.
Yeah.
But no, this is a little tougher. So
myostatin inhibitor, that'll do it.
I mean, listen, that's coming and it's not so far off. And then finally I'll get some muscle, because what is this? This is ridiculous. I'm like a regular person's form. I'm tired of looking like this. So a couple things you can do. One is train a little less for the muscles you don't super care about for now. Train a little more the muscles you do. So you're looking at your body, you're like, my arms look cool, my shoulders are awesome. My chest needs more work. Arms and shoulders, fewer sets per week, chest sets go up. That can work. Another one is the opposite, where you back up off a muscle that you've been really frying. Imagine you've been just pounding your chest and it's growing, but it's getting really tired. The last couple of months, like you're not getting as strong, kind of feel, you get sore and then you recover, but now you're lifting and you're not really even recovered. Like you're still a little sore, kind of twingy, kind of like fatigued and very tight feeling. And it's gone on for weeks. Then it's probably a good idea for a few weeks to just go on maintenance for chest training, really, really let it recover. If your overall body is feeling really fatigued, 1 or 2 weeks completely away from the gym will result in 0 muscle loss that you can't gain back in a week or 2 back from training and then some, but it'll bring down fatigue like crazy, physical fatigue. It'll reinvigorate your mechanical processes, the molecular processes for growing muscle in your muscle cells, which is awesome. So it reinvigorates your hypertrophy, but also there's a big psychological thing that happens. It's totally possible to burn out on everything. You can burn out on everything. I have a thing. Please don't take my advice. The following is a joke with a little bit of substance to it, folks. If you're kind of addicted to something, just do a ton of it until you get sick of it, but just keep doing it. And then you'll get unaddicted to it real fast. And someone's like, the thing, you want that thing? And you're like, no, get that thing away from me. And so even if you love lifting, you do it enough. At some point, you're going to look at a barbell and you're going to be like, I don't want to be here. I don't want to be at the gym. I hate how this smells. I hate how these people look. I hate lifting. It's awful.
I don't think that will work with heroin or crack.
I think the heroin or crack probably kill you.
Right. You just die.
I think that's right.
But if you were immortal, it might work because, like with the 15th crack rock per minute and you're like, I don't even want this. Yeah. For addictive drugs, do not take this advice. But you love a certain restaurant and you're like, I just always want to go to this restaurant. Fine, go to it every day this week. Dude, by Friday, you're going to be like, I could just never eat there again. It would be too soon. So there's a lot of ways in which this can work. And for training, unfortunately, when we like training and we love training, we get so much of it and we're pushing ourselves that it starts to really get to us psychologically. So when you pull away from training for a week or two, at first you're like, thank God. And then a couple days later, you're like, lifting doesn't seem so bad. A couple days later, you're like, I want to lift. And a couple days later, a few days before you resume lifting, you're like, it was a mistake to come on a cruise ship with no weight room in my current condition. I'm going to start eating machine parts. If someone does not get me to a barbell, ASAP, so they got to get the helicopter offshore, pick you up, drop you off at Gold's Gym. It's happened to me a few times. And then that buys you months of incremental, just awesome progress, because not only physiologically you recovered, but psychologically you are bought in 100%. So some people will say like, I'm really losing motivation in the gym. And I ask them, how hard have you been going? And if they're like, not hard, I'm like, you need to kind of dedicate yourself and try really full sending it. But if they're like, dude, I've been burning it, I'm like, okay, well, the burning is probably the problem.
Why?
And it's time to weave it back a little bit. And people think, well, I can't because I'll lose all my gains. I'm here to tell you, as a PhD in this stuff, that is one of the biggest myths that will not leave. You will not lose your gains in a week. You will not lose your gains in 2 weeks. If you leave lifting for months, you're going to lose some gains, but your body remembers at a cellular level that you had those gains, and it gets them back in weeks' time. It'll be the best growth you've ever seen, short of when you started. Maybe
I'm
actually
literally
even
in that
better than when you
process
started.
right now.
That's happened, right?
I'm literally in that right now. I took months off last year because I had been working out like almost every day my whole life. And now I'm like I'm able to kind of mold the body I want now, even more so by the focus you were talking about and things
Yes.
like that. So
Yes.
I'm like, okay, but the thing I will say, it's kind of harder now just to kind of get the motivation back or find the routine again. So that's where I'm at right now.
Yeah. Going away for a few weeks or a week or two is going to make you crazy motivated.
Mm-hmm.
Getting away for months
Mm-hmm.
could have the effect if you just kind of lost touch with it, you know?
Mm-hmm.
It's similar to like, I don't know, this is again, an absurd analogy. You know, when you first break up with someone and it's a tough breakup, you like don't want to see them because you're like, I still want that, but I still love them.
Mm-hmm.
And you think that'll always be a thing, but then you see them 2 years later and you look at them and they're great, best they've ever looked, all that stuff. And you know, the boyfriend they have is like you know, less attractive than your current boyfriend. So you're like, ha ha ha, take that, you know. But uh it's just something missing where you're like, I used to like that person and they're cool still and everything, but you're like, it's just not there. That is a real shame if it happens to your love affair with lifting,
Mm-hmm.
because you know the barbells just aren't. You know, no one's doing the violin anymore when you approach the barbell like this and you
Yeah.
kiss. Typically, kissing barbells is considered bad bacterial management practice, folks listening. But there are ways to get back into it, and I have a few recommendations. One is take the burden of needing to fall in love with this thing completely off of yourself. Just approach it with a beginner's mind. I'm going to go to the gym. I'm going to do the stuff that I like, the stuff that's fun. I'm going to shape my body in a way I like, and I'm going to see how the progress goes. And I'm just going to do the thing and have no expectations. When you do that and you ease in, don't go like back to 6 days a week or something that's crazy. Go to 2. And you're going to be like 2 days a week for a few weeks. It's not clicking. Your delts start to look, your shoulders start to look a little different. You have a gym session where you're feeling your swag a little bit. And you're like, man, I don't know about this. I think I want to come in 3 days a week. Don't just go to 5, go to 3. And then after a few weeks of 3, you're like, I'm back. And you're just in it and in it and in it. And look, if it never comes back to you, that desire, there's all kinds of really great ways to get in shape that don't involve lifting weights, and you're on to the next thing. No worries. But it'll probably come back. Just be patient and kind of kind and loving to yourself. Don't put this crazy burden. Like people do the value stuff. You guys ever seen that in the gym? They're like, if I'm not lifting weights, if I'm not exercising, I'm not a good person. And if I'm not loving it, something's wrong. Like, no, there's nothing wrong with any of that. Be kind and gentle to yourself. Let yourself weave back in with
You did say you were evil at the beginning, so
I'm still evil.
Right. Well, hey, I wanted to like before, I wanted to make sure we talk about diet a little bit more.
Yes,
You mentioned protein. Obviously, I'm always amazed at how much the recommendations are for muscle growth. It's I've heard essentially like, a gram per pound. I'm curious on your take on protein, not only protein, but other macronutrients like carbs where, I think people obviously don't want to add a lot of carbs to their diet, but your muscles have quite a bit of volume because of those carbs as well. So I'm curious on your take on diet and for muscle hypertrophy.
Good question. As long as you're getting enough protein, the rest is details. But details can be pretty important, not super, super minor details. And so carbs and fats matter. The best advice I have on that is don't cut out any food groups. The baseline diet for gaining muscle is enough protein, which is typically like, a little bit less than a gram per pound of your body weight per day. So if you weigh 120 pounds, If you eat about 110 to 120 grams of protein per day spread over 4 meals, you're really just getting enough protein for almost everything. For carbs and fats, whatever calories you're at that get you gaining a little bit or keep you in maintenance, or if you're losing fat a little less, try to split them roughly evenly between carbs and fats. And there's just like you can't lose with that. Also, even split between carbs and fats really allows you to have a diverse diet. If you're on a high carb, super low fat diet, you go to the restaurant with your significant other and they're like, what can you order? You're like, nothing. I got nothing on here, man. Everything on here is carbs and fats. If you do very low carb and very high fat, you go to the same restaurant, they're like, we could give you a piece of salmon or a chicken breast, and then you can just eat that and give you a side order of sadness because carbs are happiness and you clearly don't want any in your life. And you're like, okay, fine, this sucks. So eating a mixed diet is what it's called, is probably the best bet to start. If you want to push bodybuilding optimization, slightly lower fats and slightly higher carbs to get those intramuscular stores of carbs called glycogen up. They actually trigger a little bit of muscle growth. They prevent muscle loss. Fat's cool. So slightly higher carbs, slightly lower fat. But that's not a universal thing for everyone. And some people prefer higher fats and lower carbs, and they grow their best at it. So I'd say enough protein, evenly split carbs and fats. So then play around and see where it goes. If your training energy is really good, if your pumps are really good on higher carbs, hey man, that's probably the winning ticket. But try some lower carb, higher fat approaches to see maybe if those are beneficial as well.
One of the other things I think, like just in general, to talk about is hormone optimization. How big of a variable is this for people trying to, to create muscle? And I mean, maybe with men it's pretty obvious, but with women, maybe you could talk about both though.
Probably the simplest thing I can put in about hormones is they don't make a big difference unless they're really off. But if they're really off, they can make a critical difference. So if as a male or a female, your testosterone or estrogen are too low, then you're not going to see nearly the gains that you could have if they were in the normal range. And for most people, this is just not a thing. But for perimenopausal and postmenopausal women, estrogen and testosterone supplementation through a doctor is probably a really good thing to consider after blood work and symptom assessment. For males, after their late 30s, many males, not a ton, but quite a few, will underproduce testosterone, and they could highly benefit from additional testosterone or testosterone being supplied through pharmacological means, through a prescription. And if you have low testosterone or low estrogen, and they're brought up to normal or high normal levels, both play a role in muscle growth, and it's a big, big role. So it's kind of one of those things like, how important is the type of roof over your house? Not, what if you have a hole in your roof? Okay, it's really important. So don't have a hole, don't have a missing roof, and then the kind of roof doesn't matter. So hormone checkboxing, like the green checkbox of I do have enough testosterone and estrogen in my body to be in the normal range, is really probably the better way to think about it. Hormone optimization is a thing that people really looking for elite tier results out of their bodies can do. But for most folks, it's not a thing that's worth your time, but it is worth your time if your levels are way too low. And then that's going to be
what's low though, Mike? Because, like when you look at like for testosterone in men, I mean, you can be at 400 and it'll technically be normal. I would argue that, even from a metabolic dysfunction side, those types of numbers become important when you're when you're riding at like 400 as opposed to like, at least 600 or something like that. Is there any literature on this?
Yeah, a ton. So within small deviations within the normal range, so the normal range is typically about 300 to 1,000 nanograms per deciliter. And if you go from 350 to 950 over months, you almost certainly see a notable difference. If you go to 400 to 600, it may take you years to see even a subtle difference. And so if you're 400, 500, 600, optimizing up to the top end of the range is a conversation you can have. But that means like your testicles don't work anymore. You're relying on testosterone pills all the time. You got to declare them to customs when you travel out of the border or out of the country. It's just it's a whole thing. And if you ever want to stop taking them, or if you want to have children, you have to take other drugs alongside. You have to transition out. It's like, it's a lot. It's not just like, oh, I'm going to take creatine, I'm going to stop. Like, it's a big, big deal to mess with your hormones. So the best recommendation is If you have very low testosterone levels, if they're subclinical, under 300, it's probably good advice to you probably should be on replacement therapy. And then you can shoot for medium range, high range, whatever you like. If you're within the low range, but above the normative cutoff of 300, then it really just depends on your own desires and your own results. If you're getting great gains, if you feel awesome, sex drive is good, there's no reason to replace your testicles with pills. But if you're at 300 and you're really suffering a lot of the symptoms of hypogonadism, low testosterone, then yeah, it's a conversation to have about maybe even taking a replacement, a TRT situation for yourself. There's also a very big individual genetic response. Some people have such sensitive tissues and muscles to even small amounts of testosterone that at 300 a week, they're just crushing it. And if you got them up to 1,000, their health might not do so well. They might start to be a little psychotic and they might not like it. Anxiety, that whole thing. But for some folks at 600, they feel okay, but not great. And at over 1,000, they feel their best because their muscles and other cells of their body are just not as sensitive to testosterone. And there are a few other variables like free versus bound testosterone that play a factor. So it really is combining blood work values with symptoms and experiences, and then intelligently making a choice based on both of those.
You've been open about your steroid use in the past. Can you
False. I've
talk
never used steroids. Next question. I can't. This is the kind of questions you people are going to ask me. I'm not ever coming back.
Oh, come on. Can you talk about it? And then also maybe, how you think about it now, which was I don't know if that was a clear answer.
I made a calculated trade-off.
Uh-huh.
Took years off of my life in longevity. Took years off of my life in quality of life. High-dose steroids were not fun. The body result was cool. But now I'm basically on replacement doses or thereabouts, and I have actually great results. I've been able to maintain all of my muscle, seemingly, and I'm still making gains. So I think there was a period there for a few years where I was taking too much. Do I regret it? In the sense of would I have done things differently had I known all of the information I do now, including my own individual responses? Yes. Do I regret it in the sense of I think there's a time machine that could take me back? No. And so that's kind of how I feel about it. But going forward, I won't have to take super high doses of steroids anymore, mostly because the non-steroid muscle building drugs are already in primate testing. They're knocking things out of the park, and I can't wait to take them when they come out. And it's going to be a wild ride. And by wild, I mean you're not going to feel any symptoms and any side effects, except for you're just going to be much more jacked.
So you wouldn't recommend it per se to people out there?
I would say that if you're not using high dose steroids, you just haven't thought things through, go to your dealer right now, eat all of the vials, put them in your mouth, chew on the glass. Yeah, I mean, the thing I can say about steroids is it's kind of like maybe a much smaller, less dangerous version of boat racing. Do you guys know that 90% of the people that have ever attempted the over the water boat speed record have died trying?
Wow, really?
90%.
90 last I saw.
Oh, thank God I'm
and
not
so
interested.
it's gnarly, right?
That is gnarly.
Gnarly. And so with steroids, it's 5 orders of magnitude more safe, but nonetheless, it is a risk. And I think people should be able to choose their own destinies. But if you believe that steroids are a magic wonder drug that's going to grow muscle and get you all the girls and have no side effects, you are in for a very rude awakening. If you think they're totally ineffective and just cause side effects, you're just wrong because they're very, very effective, but have tons of crazy downsides. And so that is a thing that adults should be deciding with the care of a sports medicine practitioner and a coach, and in a jurisdiction in which it's legal. So if you live in the United Kingdom and possession or personal use is legal, you've really thought this through, you're over 25 years old, you know what you want out of it, start with as few steroids as you can, work up from there based on need. But again, now that these drugs are going to be here in a few years, I would say don't even do that because probably you just won't need steroids real soon. So,
what about peptides?
Peptides are cool. Some of them work okay. They're not, generally they're more like enhancing fat loss and recovery. There are some that grow some muscle, but nothing crazy. And so with peptides, it's just have realistic expectations. They're going to be a little bit enhancing. So the ultimate peptide is the entire growth hormone molecule. So pharmaceutical grade growth hormone is definitely a wonder drug. also comes with health downsides, especially long-term health, but it has a ton of really awesome upsides as well. Again, very powerful drug for adult use in very calculated circumstance. It's not a YOLO thing you just do because you're like, yeah, let's do growth hormone and steroids. That's probably the stupidest attitude about it that exists with lots of folks.
I just one thing to add to that too, Mike, is like I keep hearing people talk about growth hormone as quote unquote the fountain of youth, but the reality is that, it's probably the opposite of that.
Yeah.
Because you're raising IGF-1 levels over time. That's one of the things we have a pretty strong association with, like a decrease in longevity. So
absolutely. Now it does make your skin look cooler. It makes you look younger, but under the hood, you getting older faster, which is kind of gnarly. I will say the modern obesity drugs like semaglutide and tirzepatide and the soon to be released retatrutide, I think are probably actually longevity drugs.
Yeah.
And for most people will make you live longer and have a much better time doing it. I'm a huge fan of these drugs, and this is just the beginning of the aesthetic drug revolution. In 5 years, we'll have way more drugs that are way safer, way more effective, and are just going to be helping a lot more folks get into the shape they want, no matter their age. And I'm super, super pumped about that.
That I love.
Yeah, this has been great. Thanks so much for doing this, Mike. It's been really fun talking to you.
Guys, it's been amazing. I'm so sorry for joining the podcast late, and I had a wonderful time, and hopefully people learned something between all the dry humor, but who knows what anyone. No, I haven't learned anything for myself in years.
Fantastic.
So
Oh, I love it. Thank you so much. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back with our healthy takeout. Welcome back to Longevity Junkie. Time for our healthy takeout.
So that was fun. He's
I
great.
loved him.
Great.
Although I didn't know when he was joking some of the times. I was like, wait, what? He had me going.
Yeah, it was a little tricky. The whole Eminem thing kind of threw me off quite a bit. I mean, I was like, really? That's so cool. You were in a gang, and like I kept, I was like thinking back to the movie, and I'm like, which gang?
That was really funny. It did. No, he was cool though, but I really do appreciate the way that he had a lot of like analogies that actually kind of made sense, and it especially like when he would say things about like kind of dating and fun things like that. So I appreciated the bringing it down to a kind of an analogy that a lot of us would totally understand. So I thought that's really smart.
Yeah.
To be able to simplify. I think that's a skill.
Yeah. And one of the things I was just in terms of trying to some take home stuff, I think is important. I think when you think about, if you're thinking about building muscle, first of all, why build muscle? Of course, looking good is part of it. But what we know in terms of longevity is, one of the biggest, if not the biggest variable in terms of longevity, how long you're going to live, is the amount of lean muscle mass that you have as you get older. And so the more you can build sort of as a reserve when you're younger and you're in middle ages or whatever, the more reserve you're going to have when you're older. So there's one thing. Another thing would be simply, diet. And what do? You've got to hit the
high
protein. The protein. It sounds like a lot, and it is. I mean, targeting 1 gram per pound.
If you do it in that, how he was saying those like four meals, like you really can get that much protein. I mean, you just have to look at the things that actually have the protein. For me, I do like sardines, and that's a can of sardines is like 40 grams of protein right there.
Is it really? I had no idea.
Oh my God, it's incredible.
Yeah.
Sardines or like mackerel, any fish, any chicken, like a chicken breast, I think, is really good. Or
chicken is like 30 or 40,
for a breast.
right?
Yeah, exactly. So like right there, if I just had like a breast at lunch, and then I had a sardine for a snack, right? I mean, that's already 70 grams.
I guess for me, like, I'm 225 pounds. So, that's 225.
For me, I eat a lot. So for me, it's honestly already, that's easy because I eat a lot. So
anyway, that's the target, right? A gram, approximately a gram per pound. I thought the thing with sets and stuff was really helpful. I think essentially what he said is like, there's sort of a, anything is better than nothing. But if you really want to start building, I think the message I got was sort of, if you want to try to build muscle, try to be shooting for, hitting the same muscle group like twice a week, with,
At like 3 to 5 reps, right? Or sets.
3 to 5
3 to 5
reps, yeah, 3 to
sets
5
with about
sets.
15 to 30 reps, depending on, I would assume, your weight. So it's your capacity to even do lift.
Well, yeah, actually, and one of the things he said, which I actually learned, was it's not like just about putting more weight on there. So whatever makes your muscles kind of burn
Mhm.
out, like whatever exhausts you.
Mhm.
So, you know, I tend to, put more weight on, and because it makes me feel
Mhm,
tough,
mhm, mhm.
and I try to put more, and then I do fewer
Yep.
reps. But the reality is, you can get just as much hypertrophy if you do less weight and more reps, as long as you're getting to failure.
Mhm.
So I think that's if there's,
That's actually
what else?
that's what,
Yeah.
Arnold Schwarzenegger would do, actually. One his thing was
Mhm.
he wouldn't count reps. He would just literally go until
Yeah.
fatigue.
And I mean, the last thing I would say as a takeaway for this is, you know, we did talk about hormone optimization. I think that is a bigger issue than most people think of it
That's true.
as. And Mike actually hit it from the purely muscle standpoint, but um, there is plenty of data out there that shows that with each standard deviation difference in terms of, like, in men, in testosterone levels, when it's low, as you get lower and lower, it actually significantly increases your risk of metabolic dysfunction, metabolic syndrome.
Hmm.
So, typically when we talk about low testosterone, we're talking about, like, okay, well, what do you look for? Erectile dysfunction and all that kind of stuff. But, like, like weakness, obesity, central obesity around the belly and stuff like that. These are also signs of,
Mm.
poor hormonal balance. So I'm a big proponent, actually, of getting in front of that. I know it is kind of a thing where, you may get on to testosterone, and the next thing if you haven't had children yet, you have to worry about that. You can actually, bank sperm if that's an issue for you, stuff like that. But that would be my last takeaway. How about you? Anything else?
I mean, I'm just excited to honestly, I was excited to hear about, taking breaks and things like that for working out, because I like I mentioned earlier, like I literally took months off, and it's interesting to see that was okay, right? That he even recommends that sometimes if you like go too hard all the time and you're just burnt out on it. So, and also just like the kindness to yourself, don't like you don't your worth isn't based on how much you're lifting or how often you're at the gym or anything like that. Like I think
Yes,
and
it is. Yes, it is.
that it's fuck, don't, because it took me forever to not
Just
feel
kidding.
that way, and you have no idea. For me not to go to the gym, like, last year, I was like, I don't know, I had to literally have somebody to call, and she's like, "Just don't you're not going to the gym because you don't need to, like, stress yourself out." Like, it became a task, like, "Okay, I have to do that, and if I
Yeah.
don't do that, then I'm
Yeah.
pissed at myself, I didn't do this, I'm not worthy, blah, blah, blah." And so it's actually weird that that's a real thing, that's something that can really affect you mentally. So I was happy to hear him say, don't worry about like taking a break, and or I love hearing that you don't have to do so much to get these gains. So that was really nice too, to be like, okay, I can go, and consistency is key, basically. Consistency, it doesn't need to be hardcore all the time, It's like consistency, even like nicer reps or even lower weight sometimes. At least you're just kind of there, and you want to feel good about it, period, which I loved.
All right. Well, let's get to the gym. You want to read us out?
Yes, of course. Longevity Junkie is created by Dr. Buck Joffrey, MD, and Timothy Fonara. It is executive produced by myself, Nikki Leigh, Buck Joffrey, and Timothy Fonara. The show is produced by Pretty Fast with help from Phil Ferragamo. Original music by Alloy Tracks, and we're distributed by our friends at Acast. See you next time.